something else. Not often I get a recommendation from David Miyazaki. He said, we have a demo for a
Hello, hello, hello. As you will see from the title, and if you've watched the past broadcast as well, I'm reading Dracula, basically just together with a friend, but over Twitch. Who might be here? Oh, so you might be starting it all. I know you. That's what I'm saying. Okay. That's why I'm saying this. That is very good to know. I think it's probably fine for this screen, but it's good to know. Okay, I'm going to say that we should just start at this point because I think Connor is here, and so we are at chapter 25, which is one of the final chapters of Dracula. I think it goes to like 29 or something like that. So if you don't want spoilers in the original, whenever it was written Dracula, you might want to leave. Otherwise, we left off at a point where the crew, the gang, were trying to get the jump on Dracula. They failed, and now they're going to follow him back to Transylvania, where he fled. And everyone's dear Madame Mina is of course right now in danger of herself also becoming a vampire. So we will see what happens in regards to that. And now I will have to put on my horrible, great English accent again, which I haven't done in a month maybe. And without further ado, actually, one more thing to do. Okay. Now, without further ado, Dracula, Chapter 25, Dr. Sood's Diary, 11th October evening. Jonathan Harker has asked me to note this, as he says he is hardly equal to the task, and he wants an exact record kept. I think that none of us were surprised when we were asked to see Mrs. Harker a little before the time of sunset. We have of late come to understand that sunrise and sunset are to her times of peculiar freedom, when her old self can be manifest without any controlling force, subduing or restraining her or inciting her to action. This mood or condition begins some half hour or more before actual sunrise or sunset, and lasts till either the sun is high, or whilst the clouds are still aglow with the rays streaming above the horizon. At first there is a sort of negative condition, as if some tie were loosened, and then the absolute freedom quickly follows. When, however, the freedom ceases, the change back or relapse comes quickly, preceded only by a spell of warning silence. Tonight, when we met, she was somewhat constrained and bore all the signs of an internal struggle. I put it down myself to her making a violent effort at the earliest instant she could do so. A very few minutes, however, gave her complete control of herself. Then, motioning her husband to sit beside her on the sofa, where she was half reclining, she made the rest of us bring chairs up close. Taking her husband's hand in hers, began, "We are all here together in freedom for perhaps the last time. I know, dear, I know that you will always be with me to the end." This was to her husband, whose hand had, as we could see, tightened upon hers. "In the morning we go out upon our task, and God alone knows what may be in store for any of us. You are going to be so good to me as to take me with you. I know that all that brave, earnest men can do for a poor, weak woman whose soul perhaps is lost. No, no, not yet, but is at any rate at stake, you will do. But you must remember that I am not as you are. There is a poison in my blood, in my soul, which may destroy me, which must destroy me unless some relief comes to us. Oh, my friend, you know as well as I do that my soul is at stake, and though I know there is one way out for me, you must not, and I must not, take it." She looked appealingly to us all in turn, beginning and ending with her husband. "What is that way?" asked Van Helsing in a hoarse voice. "What is that way which we must not, may not take?" "That I may die now, either by my own hand or that of another, before the greater evil is entirely wrought. I know, and you know, that were I once dead, you could and would set free my immortal spirit, even as you did my poor Lucy's. Were death, or the fear of death, the only thing that stood in the way, I would not shrink to die here, now, amidst the friends who love me. But death is not all. I cannot believe that to die in such a case, when there is hope before us and a bitter task to be done, is God's will. Therefore I, on my part, give up here the certainty of eternal rest, and go out into the dark where may be the blackest things that the world or the netherworld holds." We were all silent, for we knew instinctively that this was only a prelude. The faces of the others were set, and Harker's grew ashen grey. Perhaps he guessed better than any of us what was coming. She continued, "This is what I can give into the hotchpot." I could not but note the quaint legal phrase which she used in such a place, and with all seriousness. "What will each of you give? Your lives, I know," she went on quickly. "That is easy for brave men. Your lives are God's, and you can give them back to him, but what will you give to me?" She looked again questioningly, but this time avoided her husband's face. Quincy seemed to understand. He nodded, and her face lit up. "Then I shall tell you plainly what I want, for there must be no doubtful matter in this connection between us now. You must promise me, one and all, even you, my beloved husband, that, should the time come, you will kill me." "What is that time?" The voice was Quincy's, but it was low and strained. "When you shall be convinced that I am so changed that it is better that I die than I may live. When I am thus dead in the flesh, then you will, without a moment's delay, drive a stake through me and cut off my head, or do whatever else may be wanting to give me rest." Quincy was the first to rise after the pause. He knelt down before her, and taking her hand in his, said solemnly, "I'm only a rough fellow, who hasn't perhaps lived as a man should to win such a distinction. But I swear to you, by all that I hold sacred and dear, that, should the time ever come, I shall not flinch from the duty that you have set us, and I promise you too that I shall make all certain. For if I am only doubtful, I shall take it that the time has come." "My true friend," was all she could say amid her fast falling tears, as, bending over, she kissed his hand. "I swear the same, my dear Madam Mina," said Van Helsing. "And I," said Lord Godalming, each of them in turn kneeling to her to take the oath. I followed myself. Then her husband turned to her wan-eyed and with a greenish pallor which subdued the snowy whiteness of his hair, and asked, "And must I, too, make such a promise, O my wife?" "You too, my dearest," she said, with infinite yearning of pity in her voice and eyes. "You must not shrink. You are nearest and dearest and all the world to me. Our souls are knit into one for all life and all time. Think, dear, that there have been times when brave men have killed their wives and their womenkind to keep them from falling into the hands of the enemy. Their hands did not falter any the more because those that they loved implored them to slay them. It is men's duty towards those whom they love in such times of sore trial. And, oh, my dear, if it is to be that I must meet my death at any hand, let it be at the hand of him that loves me best. Dr. Van Helsing, I have not forgotten your mercy in poor Lucy's case to him who loved." She stopped with a flying blush and changed her phrase. "To him who had best right to give her peace. If that time shall come again, I look to you to make it a happy memory of my husband's life, that it was his loving hand which set me free from the awful thrall upon me." "Again I swear," came the professor's resonant voice. Mrs. Harker smiled, positively smiled, as with a sigh of relief she leaned back and said, "And now one word of warning which you must never forget. This time, if it ever come, may come quickly and unexpectedly, and in such case you must lose no time in using your opportunity. At such a time I myself might be, nay, if the time ever comes, shall be, leagued with your enemy against you. One more request." She became very solemn as she said this. "It is not vital and necessary like the other, but I want you to do one thing for me, if you will." We all acquiesced, but no one spoke. There was no need to speak. "I want you to read the burial service." She was interrupted by a deep groan from her husband. Taking his hand in hers, she held it over her heart and continued, "You must read it over me some day. Whatever may be the issue of all this fearful state of things, it will be a sweet thought to all or some of us. You, my dearest, will I hope read it, for then it will be in your voice, in my memory, forever, come what may." "But oh, my dear one," he pleaded, "death is afar off from you." "Nay," she said, holding up a warning hand. I am deeper in death at this moment than if the weight of an earthly grave lay heavy upon me." "Oh, my wife, must I read it?" he said before he began. "It would comfort me, my husband," was all she said, and he began to read when she had got the book ready. How could anyone tell of that strange scene, its solemnity, its gloom, its sadness, its horror, and withal its sweetness? Even a skeptic, who can see nothing but a travesty of bitter truth in anything holy or emotional, would have been melted to the heart had he seen that little group of loving and devoted friends kneeling round that stricken and sorrowing lady, or heard the tender passion of her husband's voice, as in tones so broken with emotion that often he had to pause, he read the simple and beautiful service from the burial of the dead. I I cannot go on. Words and voice fail me. She was right in her instinct. Strange as it all was, bizarre as it may hereafter seem, even to us who felt its potent influence at the time, it comforted us much, and the silence which showed Mrs. Harker's coming relapse from her freedom of soul did not seem so full of despair to any of us as we had dreaded. Jonathan Harker's Journal, 15th October, Varna. We left Charing Cross on the morning of the 12th, got to Paris the same night, and took the places secured for us in the Orient Express. We travelled night and day, arriving here at about 5 o'clock. Lord Godalming went to the consulate to see if any telegram had arrived for him, whilst the rest of us came on to this hotel, the Odysseus. The journey may have had incidents. I was, however, too eager to get on to care for them. Until the Czarina Katerina comes into port, there will be no interest for me in anything in the wide world. Thank God, Mina as well looks to be getting stronger. Her color is coming back. She sleeps a great deal. Throughout the journey, she slept nearly all the time. Before sunrise and sunset, however, she is very wakeful and alert, and it has become a habit for Van Helsing to hypnotize her at such times. At first, some effort was needed, and he had to make many passes, but now she seems to yield at once, as if by habit, and scarcely any action is needed. He seems to have power at these particular moments to simply will and her thoughts obey him. He always asks her what she can see and hear. She answers to the first, "Nothing, all is dark," and to the second, "I can hear the waves lapping against the ship and the water rushing by. Canvas and cordage strain and masts and yards creak. The wind is high, I can hear it in the shrouds, and the bow throws back the foam." It is evident that the Czarina Katarina is still at sea, hastening on her way to Varna. Lord Godalming has just returned. He had 4 telegrams on each day, one each day since we started, and all to the same effect: that the Czarina Katarina had not been reported to Lloyd's from anywhere. He had arranged before leaving London that his agent should send him every day a telegram saying the ship had been reported. He was to have a message even if she were not reported, so that he might be sure that there was a watch being kept at the other end of the wire. We had dinner and went to bed early. Tomorrow we are to see the Vice-Consul, and to arrange, if we can, about getting on board the ship as soon as she arrives. Van Helsing says that our chance will be to get on the boat between sunrise and sunset. The Count, even if he takes the form of a bat, cannot cross the running water of his own volition, and so cannot leave the ship. As he dare not change the man's form without suspicion, which he evidently wishes to avoid, he must remain in the box. If, then, we can come on board after sunrise, he is at our mercy, for we can open the box and make sure of him, as we did of poor Lucy, before he wakes. What mercy he shall get from us will not count for much. We think that we shall not have much trouble with officials or the seamen. Thank God, this is the country where bribery can do anything, and we are well supplied with money. We have only to make sure that the ship cannot come into port between sunset and sunrise without our being warned, and we shall be safe. Judge Moneybag will settle this case, I think. The 16th of October. Mina's report, still the same. Lapping waves and rushing water, darkness and favouring winds. We are evidently in good time, and when we hear of the Czarina Katerina, we shall be ready. As she must pass the Dardanelles, we are sure to have some report. 17th October. Everything is pretty well fixed now, I think, to welcome the Count on his return from his tour. Godalming told the shippers that he fancied the box sent aboard might contain something stolen from a friend of his, and got a half consent that he might open it at his own risk. The owner gave him a paper telling the captain to give him every facility in doing whatever he chose on board the ship, and also a similar authorization to his agent at Varna. We have seen the agent, who was much impressed with Godalming's kindly manner to him, and we are all satisfied that whatever he can do to aid our wishes will be done. We have already arranged what to do in case we get the box open. If the Count is there, Van Helsing and Seward will cut off his head at once and drive a stake through his heart. Morris and Godalming and I shall prevent interference, even if we have to use the arms which we shall have ready. The professor says that if we can so treat the Count's body, it will soon after fall into dust. In such case, there would be no evidence against us, in case any suspicion of murder were aroused. But even if it were not, we should stand or fall by our act, and perhaps some day this very script may be evidence to come between some of us and a rope. For myself, I shall take the chance only too thankfully if it were to come. We mean to leave no stone unturned to carry out our intent. We have arranged with certain officials that the instant the Czarina Katarina is seen, we are to be informed by a special messenger. 24th October. A whole week of waiting. Daily telegrams to Godalming, but only the same story. Not yet reported. Mina's morning and evening hypnotic answer is unvaried. Lapping waves, rushing water, and creaking masts. Telegram, October 24th. Rufus Smith, Lloyd's London to Lord Godalming, care of HBM, Vice-Consul Varna. Jarina Katarina reported this morning from Dardanelles. Dr. Sood's diary, 25th October. How I miss my phonograph. To write diary with a pen is irksome to me, but Van Helsing says I must. We were all wild with excitement yesterday when Godalming got his telegram from Lloyd's. I know now what men feel in battle when the call to action is heard. Mrs. Harker, alone of our party, did not show any signs of emotion. After all, it is not strange that she did not, for we took special care not to let her know anything about it, and we all tried not to show any excitement when we were in her presence. In old days she would, I am sure, have noticed, no matter how we might have tried to conceal it, but in this way she has greatly changed during the past 3 weeks. The lethargy grows upon her, and though she seems strong and well, and is getting back some of her colour, Van Helsing and I are not satisfied. We talk of her often. We have not, however, said a word to the others. It would break poor Harker's heart, certainly his nerve, if he knew that we had even a suspicion on the subject. Van Helsing examines, he tells me, her teeth very carefully whilst she is in the hypnotic condition, for he says that, so long as they do not begin to sharpen, there is no active danger of a change in her. If this change should come, it would be necessary to take steps. We both know what those steps would have to be, though we do not mention our thoughts to each other. We should neither of us shrink from the task, awful though it be to contemplate. Euthanasia is an excellent and a comforting word. I am grateful to whoever invented it. It is only about 24 hours' sail from the Dardanelles to here, at the rate the Jarina Katarina has come from London. She should therefore arrive some time in the morning, but as she cannot possibly get in before then, we are all about to retire early. We shall get up at 1 o'clock, so as to be ready. 25th October, noon. No news yet of the ship's arrival. Mrs. Harker's hypnotic report this morning was the same as usual, so it is possible that we may get news at any moment. We men are all in a fever of excitement, except Harker, who is calm. His hands are cold as ice, and an hour ago I found him whetting the edge of the great Gorka knife, which he now always carries with him. It will be a bad lookout for the Count if the edge of that kukri ever touches his throat, driven by that stern, ice-cold hand. Van Helsing and I were a little alarmed about Mrs. Harker today. About noon she got into a sort of lethargy, which we did not like, although we kept silence to the others. We were neither of us happy about it. She had been restless all the morning, so that we were at first glad to know that she was sleeping. When, however, her husband mentioned casually that she was sleeping so soundly that he could not wake her, we went to her room to see for ourselves. She was breathing naturally and looked so well and peaceful that we agreed that the sleep was better for her than anything else. Poor girl, she has so much to forget that it is no wonder that sleep, if it brings oblivion to her, does her good. Later. Our opinion was justified, for when, after a refreshing sleep of some hours, she woke up, she seemed brighter and better than she had been for days. At sunset she made the usual hypnotic report. Wherever he may be in the Black Sea, the Count is hurrying to his destination. To his doom, I trust. Another day, 26th October. Another day and no tidings of the Jarina Katarina. She ought to be here by now. That she is still journeying somewhere is apparent, for Mrs. Harker's hypnotic report at sunrise was still the same. It is possible that the vessel may be lying by, at times, for fog. Some of the steamers which came in last evening reported patches of fog both north and south of the port. We must continue our watching, as the ship may now be signalled in any moment. 27th October, noon. Most strange, no news yet of the ship we wait for. Mrs. Harker reported last night and this morning as usual, lapping waves and rushing water, though she added that the waves were very faint. The telegrams from London have been the same. No further report. Van Helsing is terribly anxious, and told me just now that he fears the Count is escaping us. He added significantly, I did not like that lethargy of Madame Mina's. Souls and memories can do strange things during trance. I was about to ask him more, but Harker just then came in, and he held up a warning hand. We must try tonight at sunset to make her speak more fully when in her hypnotic state. 28th October. Telegram. Rufus Smith, London to Lord Godalming. Care HBM Vice Consul. Varna. Chirina Katarina reported entering Galatz at 1 o'clock today. Dr. Seward's diary. 28th October. When the telegram came announcing the arrival at Galatz, I did not think it was such a shock to any of us as might have been expected. True, we did not know whence, or how, or when the bolt would come, but I think we all expected that something strange would happen. The delay of arrival at Varna made us individually satisfied that things would not be just as we had expected. We only waited to learn where the change would occur. Nonetheless, however, was it a surprise. I suppose that nature works on such a hopeful basis that we believe against ourselves that things will be as they ought to be, not as we should know that they will be. Transcendentalism is a beacon to the angels, even if it be a will-o-wisp to the man. It was an odd experience, and we all took it differently. Van Helsing raised his hand over his head for a moment, as though in remonstrance with the Almighty, but he said not a word, and in a few seconds stood up with his face sternly set. Lord Godalming grew very pale and sat breathing heavily. I was myself half stunned and looked in wonder at one after another. Quincey Morris tightened his belt with that quick movement which I knew so well. In our old wandering days it meant action. Mrs. Harker grew ghastly white, so that the scar on her forehead seemed to burn, but she folded her hands meekly and looked up in prayer. Harker smiled, actually smiled, the dark, bitter smile of one who is without hope. But at the same time his action belied his words, for his hands instinctively sought the hilt of the great kukri knife and rested there. When does the next train start for Galatz? Said Van Helsing to us generally. At 6:30 tomorrow morning. We all started, for the answer came from Mrs. Harker. How on earth do you know? Said Aunt. You forget, or perhaps you do not know, though Jonathan does, and so does Dr. Van Helsing, that I am the train fiend. At home in Exeter, I always used to make up the timetables so as to be helpful to my husband. I found it so useful sometimes that I always make a study of the timetables now. I knew that if anything were to take us to Castle Dracula, we should go by Galatz, or at any rate through Bucharest, so I learned the times very carefully. And happily there are not many to learn, as the only train tomorrow leaves, as I say. Wonderful woman, murmured the professor. Can't we get a special? Asked Lord Godalming. Van Helsing shook his head. I fear not. This land is very different from yours or mine. Even if we did have a special, it would probably not arrive as soon as our regular train. Moreover, we have something to prepare. We must think. Now let us organize. You, friend Arthur, go to the train and get the tickets and arrange that all be ready for us to go in the morning. Do you, friend Jonathan, go to the agent of the ship and get from him letters to the agent in Galatz, with authority to make search this ship just as it was here. Morris Quincey, you see the Vice Consul and get his aid with his fellow in Galatz and all he can do to make our way smooth, so that no times be lost when over the Danube. John will stay with Madame Mina and me, and we shall consult. For so, if time be long, you may be delayed, and it will not matter when the sun set, since I am here with Madame to make report. And I, said Mrs. Harker brightly, and more like her old self than she had been for many a long day, shall try to be of use in all ways, and shall think and write for you as I used to do. Something is shifting from me in some strange way, and I feel freer than I have been of late. The three younger men looked happier at the moment as they seemed to realize the significance of her words, but Van Helsing and I, turning to each other, met each a grave and troubled glance. We said nothing at the time, however. When the three men had gone out to their tasks, Van Helsing asked Mrs. Harker to look up the copy of the diaries and find him part of Harker's journal at the castle. She went away to get it. When the door was shut upon her, he said to me, "We mean the same. Speak out." "There is some change. It is hope that makes me sick, for it may deceive us." "Quite so. Do you know why I asked her to get the manuscript?" "No," said I, "unless it was to get an opportunity of seeing me alone." "You are in part right, friend John, but only in part. I want to tell you something. I know, my friend, I am taking a terrible risk, but I believe it is right. In the moment when Madam Mina said those words that arrest both their understanding, an inspiration came to me. In the trance of 3 days ago, the Count sent her his spirit to read her mind, or more like, he took her to see him in his earth box in the ship with water rushing, just as it go free at rise instead of sun. He learned then that we are here, for she have more to tell in her open life with eyes to see and ears to hear than he, shut as he is in his coffin box. Now he makes his most effort to escape us. At present he want her not. He is sure, with his so great knowledge, that she will come at his call. But he cut her off. Take her as he can do out of his own power, that so she come not to him. Ah, there I have hope that our man-brains that have been of man so long and have not lost the grace of God will come higher than his child-brain that lie in his tomb for centuries. That grow not yet to our stature, and that do work only selfish and therefore small. Here comes Madam Mina, not a word to her of our trance. She know it not, and it would overwhelm her and make despair, just when we want all her hope, all her courage. But most we want all her great brain, which is trained like man's brain, but is of sweet woman, and have a special power which the Count give her, and which she may not take away altogether, though he think not so. Hush, let me speak, and you shall learn. Oh, John, my friend, we are in awful straits. I fear as I never feared before. We can only trust the good God. Silent. Here she comes. I thought that the professor was going to break down and have hysterics, just as he had when Lucy died. But with a great effort he controlled himself, and was at perfect nervous poise when Mrs. Harker tripped into the room, bright and happy-looking, and, in the doing of work, seemingly forgetful of her misery. As she came in, she handed a number of sheets of typewriting to Van Helsing. He looked over them gravely, his face brightening up as he read. Then, holding the pages between his finger and thumb, he said, "Friend John, to you with so much of experience already, and you too, dear Madam Mina, that are young, here's a lesson. Do not fear ever to think. A half-thought has been buzzing often in my brain, but I feared to let him loose his wings. Here now, with more knowledge, I go back to where that half-thought come from, and I find that he be no half-thought at all. That be a whole thought, though so young that he is not yet strong to use his little wings. Nay, like the ugly duck of my friend Hans Andersen, he be no duck thought at all, but a big swan thought that sail nobly on big wings when the time come for him to try them. See, I read here what Jonathan have written. That other of his race, who, in a later age, again and again brought his forces over the great river into Turkey land, who, when he was beaten back, came again and again and again, though he had to come alone from the bloody field where his troops were being slaughtered, since he knew that he alone could ultimately triumph. What does this tell us? Not much? No. The Count's child thought see nothing, therefore he speaks so free. Your man thought see nothing, my man thought see nothing, till just now, no. But there comes another word from some one who speak without thought, because she too know not what it mean, what it might mean. Just as there are elements which rest, yet when in nature's course they move on their way and they touch, then poof, and there comes a flash of light, heaven-wide, that blind and kill and destroy some, but that show up all earth below for leagues and leagues. Is it not so? Well, I shall explain. To begin, have you ever studied the philosophy of crime? Yes? And no. You, John, yes, for it is a study of insanity. You know, Madam Mina, for crime touched you not but once. Still, your mind works true, and argues not a particulari ad universale. There is this peculiarity in criminals. It is so constant, in all countries, and at all times, that even police, who know not much from philosophy come to know it empirically, that is to be empiric. The criminal always work at one crime. That is, the true criminal who seems predestinate to crime and who will have no other. This criminal has not full man brain. He is clever and cunning and resourceful, but he be not of man stature as to brain. He be of child brain in much. Now this criminal of ours is predestinate to crime also. He too of child brain, and it is of the child to do what he have done. The little bird, the little fish, the little animal learn not by principle, but empirically. And when he learn to do, then there is to him the ground to start from to do more. Thus posto, said Archimedes, give me a fulcrum, and I shall move the world. To do once is the fulcrum whereby child brain become man brain, and until he have the purpose to do so more, he continue to do the same again every time, just as he have done before. Oh, my dear, I see that your eyes are opened, and that to you the lightning flash of all the leagues. For Mrs. Harker began to clap her hands, and her eyes sparkled. He went on. Now you shall speak. Tell us two dry men of science what you see with those so bright eyes. He took her hand and held it whilst she spoke, his finger and thumb close on her pulse, as I thought instinctively and unconsciously as she spoke. The Count is a criminal, and of criminal type. Nordau and Lombroso would so classify him, and qua criminal he is of imperfectly formed mind. Thus, in a difficulty, he has to seek resource and habit. His past is a clue, and the one page of it that we know, and that from his own lips, tells that once before, and when in what Mr. Morris would call a tad place, he went back to his own country from the land he had tried to invade, and thence, without losing purpose, prepared himself for a new effort. He came again better equipped for his work, and won. So he came to London to invade the new land. He was beaten, and when all hope of success was lost, and his existence in danger, he fled back over the sea to his home, just as formerly he had fled back over the Danube from Turkey land. Good, good, oh, you so clever lady, said Van Helsing enthusiastically, as he stooped and kissed her hand. A moment later he said to me, as calmly as though we had been having a sick-room consultation, 72 only, and in all this excitement I have hope. Turning to her again, he said with keen expectation, but go on, go on. There is more to tell you, if you will. Be not afraid. John and I know. I do, in any case, and shall tell you if you are right. Speak, without fear. I will try to, but you will forgive me if I seem egotistical. Nay, fear not, you must be egotist, for it is of you that we think. Then, as he is criminal, he is selfish, and as his intellect is small and his action is based on selfishness, he confines himself to one purpose. That purpose is remorseless. As he fled back over the Danube, leaving his forces to be cut to pieces, so now he is intent on being safe, careless of all. So his own selfishness frees my soul somewhat from the terrible power which he acquired over me on that dreadful night. I felt it. Oh, I felt it. Thank God for his great mercy. My soul is freer than it has been since that awful hour, and all that haunts me is a fear lest in some trance or dream he may have used my knowledge for his ends. The professor stood up. He has so used your mind, and by it he has left us your environment, whilst the ship that carried him rushed through enveloping fog up to Galatz, where, doubtless, he had made preparation for escaping from us. But his child mind only saw so far, and it may be that, as ever is in God's providence, the very thing that the evildoer most reckoned on for his selfish good turns out to be his chiefest harm. The hunter is taken in his own snare, as the great psalmist says. For now that he thinks he is free from every trace of us all, and that he has escaped us with so many hours to him, then his selfish child brain will whisper him to sleep. He thinks, too, that as he cut himself off from knowing your mind, there can be no knowledge of him to you. There is where he failed. That terrible baptism of blood, which he give you, makes you free to go to him in spirit, as you have as yet done in your times of freedom when the sun rises and set. At such times you go by my volition, and not by his, and this power too good of you and others, as you have won from your suffering at his hands. This is now all the more precious that he know it not, and regard himself have even cut himself off from his knowledge of our where. We, however, are not selfish, and we believe that God is with us through all this blackness and these many dark hours. We shall follow him, and we shall not flinch, even if we peril ourselves that we become like him. Friend John, this has been a great hour, and it have done much to advance us on our way. You must be scribe and write them all down, so that when the others return from their work you can give it to them. Then they shall know as we do. And so I have written it whilst we wait their return, and Mrs. Harker has written with her typewriter, all since she brought the MS to us. And here, I think we will take a short break. For 10-ish minutes. more sips of water, and then I think we will get back to it. Alright. Chapter 26. Dr. Seward's Diary. 29th October. This is written in the train from Varna to Galatz. Last night we all assembled a little before the time of sunset. Each of us had done his work as well as he could. So far as thought and endeavour and opportunity go, we are prepared for the whole of our journey, and for our work when we get to Galatz. When the usual time came round, Mrs. Harker prepared herself for her hypnotic effort, and after a longer and more serious effort on the part of Van Helsing than has been usually necessary, she sank into the trance. Usually she speaks on a hint, but this time the professor had to ask her questions, and to ask them pretty resolutely before we could learn anything. At last her answer came. I can see nothing. We are still, there are no waves lapping, but only a steady swirl of water softly running against the hawser. I can hear men's voices calling near and far, and the roll and creak of oars in the rowlocks. A gun is fired somewhere. The echo of it seems far away. There is tramping of feet overhead, and ropes and chains are dragged along. What is this? There's a gleam of light. I can feel the air blowing upon me. Here she stopped. She had risen as if impulsively from where she lay on the sofa, and raised both her hands, palms upwards as if lifting a weight. Van Helsing and I looked at each other with understanding. Quincy raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at her intently, whilst Harker's hand instinctively closed round the hilt of his kukri. There was a long pause. We all knew that the time when she could speak was passing, but we felt that it was useless to say anything. Suddenly she sat up, and as she opened her eyes, said sweetly, "Would none of you like a cup of tea? You must all be so tired." We could only make her happy, and so acquiesced. She bustled off to get tea. When she had gone, Van Helsing said, "You see, my friends, he is close to land. He has left his earth chest, but he has yet to get on shore. In the night he may lie hidden somewhere, but if he be not carried on shore, or if the ship do not touch it, he cannot achieve the land. In such case he can, if it be in the night, change his form and can jump, or fly on shore, as it did at Whitby. But if the day come before he get on shore, then, unless he be carried, he cannot escape. And if he be carried, then the customs men may discover what the box contain. Thus, in fine, if he escape not on shore tonight, or before dawn, there will be the whole day lost to him. We may then arrive in time, for if he escape not at night, we shall come on him in daytime, boxed up and at our mercy, for he dare not be his true self, awake and visible, lest he be discovered." There was no more to be said, so we waited in patience until the dawn, at which time we might learn more from Mrs. Harker. Early this morning we listened, with breathless anxiety for her response in her trance. The hypnotic stage was even longer in coming than before, and when it came, the time remaining until full sunrise was so short that we began to despair. Van Helsing seemed to throw his whole soul into the effort. At last, in obedience to his will, she made reply, "All is dark. I hear lapping water level with me, and some creaking as of wood on wood." She paused, and the red sun shot up. We must wait till tonight. And so it is that we are travelling towards Galatz in an agony of expectation. We are due to arrive between 2 and 3 in the morning, but already at Bucharest we are 3 hours late, so we cannot possibly get in till well after sunup. Thus we shall have 2 more hypnotic messages from Mrs. Harker. Either or both may possibly throw more light on what is happening. Later. Sunset has come and gone. Fortunately, it came at a time when there was no distraction, for had it occurred whilst we were at a station, we might not have secured the necessary calm and isolation. Mrs. Harker yielded to the hypnotic influence even less readily than this morning. I am in fear that her power of reading the Count's sensations may die away just when we want it most. It seems to me that her imagination is beginning to work. Whilst she has been in the trance hitherto, she has confined herself to the simplest of facts. If this goes on, it may ultimately mislead us. If I thought that the Count's power over her would die away equally with her power of knowledge, it would be a happy thought. But I am afraid that it may not be so. When she did speak, her words were enigmatical. Something is going out. I can feel it pass me like a cold wind. I can hear, far off, confused sounds, as of men talking in strange tongues, fierce falling water and the howling of wolves. She stopped, and a shudder ran through her, increasing in intensity for a few seconds, till, at the end, she shook as though in a palsy. She said no more, even in answer to the professor's imperative questioning. When she woke from the trance, she was cold, and exhausted, and languid, but her mind was all alert. She could not remember anything, but asked what she had said when she was told. She pondered over it deeply for a long time and in silence. 30th October, 7 a.m. We are near Galatz now, and I may not have time to write later. Sunrise this morning was anxiously looked for by us all. Knowing of the increasing difficulty of procuring the hypnotic trance, Van Helsing began his passes earlier than usual. They produced no effect, however, until the regular time, when she yielded with a still greater difficulty, only a minute before the sun rose. The professor lost no time in his questioning. Her answer came with equal quickness. All is dark. I hear water swirling by, level with my ears, and the creaking of wood on wood. Cattle low, far off. There is another sound, a queer one, like... She stopped and grew white, and whiter still. Go on, speak, I command you, said Van Helsing in an agonized voice. At the same time there was despair in his eyes, for the risen sun was reddening even Mrs. Harker's pale face. She opened her eyes, and we all started as she said, sweetly and seemingly with the utmost unconcern, "Oh, Professor, why ask me to do what you know I can't? I don't remember anything." Then, seeing the look of amazement on our faces, she said, turning from one to the other with a troubled look, What have I said? What have I done? I know nothing, only that I was lying here, half asleep, and heard you say, 'Go on, speak, I command you.' It seemed so funny to hear you order me about, as if I were a bad child." "Oh, Madam Mina," he said sadly, "it is proof, if proof be needed, of how I love and honor you, when a word for your good, spoken more earnest than ever, can seem so strange because it is to order her whom I am proud to obey. The whistles are sounding, we are nearing Galatz. We are on fire with anxiety and eagerness." Mina Harker's Journal, 30th of October. Mr. Morris took me to the hotel where our rooms had been ordered by telegraph, he being the one who could best be spared, since he does not speak any foreign language. The forces were distributed much as they had been at Varna, except that Lord Godalming went the vice-consul, as his rank might serve as an immediate guarantee of some sort to the official, we being in extreme hurry. Jonathan and the 2 doctors went to the shipping agent to learn particulars of the arrival of the Czarina Katarina. Later. Lord Godalming has returned. The consul is away and the vice-consul sick, so the routine work has been attended to by a clerk. He was very obliging and offered to do anything in his power. Jonathan Harker's Journal, 30th October. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Van Helsing, Dr. Seward and I called on Messrs. Mackenzie and Steinkopf, the agents of the London firm of Hafgood. They had received a wire from London in answer to Lord Godalming's telegram request, asking us to show them any civility in their power. They were more than kind and courteous, and took us at once on board the Czarina Katarina, which lay at anchor out in the river harbour. There we saw the captain, Donaldson by name, who told us of his voyage. He said that in all his life he had never had so favourable a run. Man, he said, but it made us afeard, for we expected that we should have had to pay for it with some rare piece of ill luck, so as to keep up the average. It's no canny to run for London to the Black Sea without a hint you as though the Dale himself were blowing on yourself for his own purpose. And all the time we could not spare a thing. Gin we were nigh a ship or a port or a headland, like fog fell on us and travelled with us, till when after we had left it we were looked out, the Dale a thing could we see. We ran by Gibraltar without being able to signal, until we come to the Dardanelles and had to wait to get our permit to pass. We were never within hail of aught. At first I inclined to slack off sail and beat about till the fog was lifted. But whilst I thought that if the Dale was meant to get us into the Black Sea quick, he was like to do it whether we would or not. If we had a quick voyage, it would be naught to our miscredit with the owners, or not hurt to our traffic, and the old man would have served his own purpose, would be decently grateful to us for no hindering it. This mixture of simplicity and cunning, of superstition and commercial reasoning, aroused Van Helsing, who said, "Mine friend, that devil is more clever than he is thought by some, and he know when he meet his match." The skipper was not displeased with the compliment, and went on. When we got past the Bosphorus, the men began to grumble. Some of them, the Romanians, came and asked me to heave overboard the big box which had been put on board by a queer-looking old man just before we had started for London. I'd seen them spare at the fellow and put out their 12 fingers when they saw him to guard against the evil eye. Man, but the superstition of foreigners is perfectly ridiculous. I sent them about their own business pretty quick. It's just after a folk closed in on us I sent them about their business pretty quick, but it's just after a folk closed in on us. I felt a wee bit as they did, and then something. Though I wouldn't say it was again the big box. Well, on we went, and as the fog didn't let up in 5 days, it just let the wind carry us. If the Dale wanted to get somewhere, well, he would fetch it up a rate. And if he didn't, well, we'd keep a sharp lookout anyhow. Sure enough, we had a fair way in deep water all the time. And 2 days ago, when the morning sun came through the fog, we found ourselves just in the river opposite Galatz. The Romanians were wild and wanted me right or wrong to take out the box and fling it in the river. I had to argue with him about it with a handspike, and when the last of them rose off the deck with his head in his hand, I convinced him that, evil eye or no evil eye, the property and the trust of my owners were better in my hands than in the river Danube. They had, mind you, taken the box on deck, ready to fling in, and as it was marked by Galatz via Varna, I thought I'd let it lie till we discharged in the port and get rid of it altogether. We didn't do much clearing that day, and had to remain the night at anchor. But in the morning, bright and early, an hour before sunup, a man came aboard with an order written to him from England to receive a box marked for one Count Dracula. Sure enough, the matter was one ready to his hand. He had his papers to read, and glad I was to be rid of the damn thing, for I was beginning myself to feel uneasy. If the Dale did have any luggage aboard the ship, I'm thinking it was none other than the same. What was the name of the man who took it? Asked Dr. Van Helsing with restrained eagerness. I'll be telling you quick, he answered, and stepping down to his cabin, produced a receipt signed Emanuel Hildesheim. Burgenstrasse 16 was the address. We found out that this was all the captain knew, so with thanks we came away. We found Hildesheim in his office, a Hebrew of rather the Adelphi theatre type, with a nose like a sheep and a fez. His arguments were pointed with specie, we doing the punctuation, and with a little bargaining he told us what he knew. This turned out to be simple but important. He had received a letter from Mr. de Ville of London telling him to receive, if possible, before sunrise so as to avoid customs, a box which would arrive at Galatz in the Czarina Katarina. This he was to give in charge of a certain Petrov Skinsky, who dealt with the Slovaks who traded down the river to the port. He had been paid for his work by an English banknote which had been duly cast for gold at the Danube International Bank. When Skinsky had come to him, he had taken him to the ship and handed over the box so as to save porterage. That was all he knew. We then sought for Skinsky, but were unable to find him. One of his neighbours, who did not seem to bear him any affection, said that he had gone away 2 days before, no one knew whither. This was corroborated by his landlord, who had received by messenger the key of the house together with the rent due in English money. This had been between 10 and 11 o'clock last night. We were at a standstill again. Whilst we were talking, one came running and breathlessly gulped out that the body of Skinsky had been found inside the wall of the churchyard of St. Peter, and that the throat had been torn open as if by some wild animal. Those we had been speaking with ran off to see the horror, the women crying out, "This is the work of a Slovak." We hurried away lest we should have been in some way drawn into the affair, and so detained. As we came home, we could arrive at no definite conclusion. We were all convinced that the box was on its way, by water, to somewhere, but where that might be we would have to discover. With heavy hearts we came home to the hotel, to Mina. When we met together, the first thing was to consult as to taking Mina again into our confidence. Things are getting desperate, and if there's at least a chance, though a hazardous one, as a preliminary step, I was released from my promise to her. Mina Harker's journal. 30th of October, evening. They were so tired and dispirited that there was nothing to be done till they had some rest, so I asked them all to lie down for half an hour whilst I should enter everything up to the moment. I felt so grateful to the man who invented the traveller's typewriter, and to Mr. Morris for getting this one for me. I should have felt quite astray doing the work if I had to write with a pen. It is all done. Poor dear Jonathan, what he must have suffered. What must he be suffering now? He lies on the sofa, hardly seeming to breathe, and his whole body appears in collapse. His brows are knit, his face is drawn with pain. Poor fellow, maybe he is thinking, and I can see his face all wrinkled up with the concentration of his thoughts. Oh, if I could only help it all, I shall do what I can. I have asked Dr. Van Helsing, and he has got me all the papers that I have not yet seen. Whilst they are resting, I shall go over all carefully, and perhaps I may arrive at some conclusion. I shall try to follow the professor's example, and think without prejudice on the facts before me. I do believe that under God's providence I have made a discovery. I shall get the maps and look over them. I am more sure than ever that I am right. My new conclusion is ready, so I shall get our party together and read it. They can judge it. It's well to be accurate, and every minute is precious. Mina Harker's memorandum, entered in her journal. Ground of inquiry. Count Dracula's problem is to get back to his own place. A. He must be brought back by someone. This is evident, for had he power to move himself as he wished, he could go either as man, or wolf, or bat, or in some other way. He evidently fears discovery or interference in the state of helplessness in which he must be, confined as he is between dawn and sunset in his wooden box. B. How is he to be taken? Here a process of exclusions may help us, by road, by rail, by water. 1. By road. There are endless difficulties, especially in leaving the city. X. There are people, and people are curious and investigate. A hint, a surmise, a doubt as to what might be in the box would destroy him. Y. There are, or there may be, customs and octroi officers to pass. Z. His pursuers might follow. This is his highest fear, and in order to prevent his being betrayed, he has repelled, so far as he can, even his victim, me. 2. By rail. There is no one in charge of the box. It would have to take its chance of being delayed, and delay would be fatal, with enemies on the track. True, he might escape at night, but what would he be if left in a strange place with no refuge that he could fly to? This is not what he intends, and he doesn't mean to risk it. 3. By water. Here is the safest way, in one respect, but with most danger in another. On the water he is powerless except at night. Even then he can only summon fog and storm and snow and his wolves. But were he wrecked, the living water would engulf him, helpless, and he would indeed be lost. He could have the vessel drive to land, but if it were unfriendly land, wherein he was not free to move, his position would still be desperate. We know from the record that he was on the water. So what we have to do is ascertain what water. The first thing is to realize exactly what he has done as yet. We may then get a light on what his later task is to be. Firstly, we must differentiate between what he did in London as part of his general plan of action, when he was pressed for moments and had to arrange as best he could. Secondly, we must see, as well as we can surmise it from the facts we know of, what he has done here. As to the first, he evidently intended to arrive at Galatz and sent envoys to Varna to deceive us lest we should ascertain his means of exit from England. His immediate and sole purpose, then, was to escape. The proof of this is the letter of instructions sent to Emanuel Hildesheim to clear and take away the box before sunrise. There is also the instruction to Petrovskinsky. These we must only guess at, but there must have been some letter or message since Skinsky came to Hildesheim. That, so far, his plans were successful, we know. The Tsarina Katarina made a phenomenally quick journey, so much so that Captain Donaldson's suspicions were aroused. But his superstition united with his canniness played the Count's game for him, and he ran with his favouring wind through fogs and all till he brought a blindfold at Galatz. That the Count's arrangements were well made had been proved. Hildesheim cleared the box, took it off, and gave it to Skinsky. Skinsky took it, and here we lost the trail. We only know that the box is somewhere on the water, moving along. The customs and the octroi, if there be any, have been avoided. Now we come to what the Count must have done after his arrival, on land at Galatz. The box was given to Skinsky before sunrise. At sunrise the Count could appear in his own form. Here we ask why Skinsky was chosen at all. Here we ask why Skinsky was chosen at all to aid in the work. In my husband's diary, Skinsky is mentioned as dealing with a Slovak who trade down the river to the port, and the man's remark that the murder was the work of a Slovak showed the general feeling against this class. The Count wanted isolation. My surmise is this, that in London the Count decided to get back to his castle by water as the most safe and secret way. He was brought from the castle by Zgani, and probably they delivered their cargo to Slovaks who took the boxes to Varna, for there they were shipped for London. Thus the Count had knowledge of the persons who could arrange this service. When the box was on land, before sunrise or after sunset, he came out from his box, met Skinsky, and instructed him what to do as to arranging the carriage of the box up some river. When this was done, and he knew that all was in train, he blotted out his traces, as he thought, by murdering his agent. I have examined the map, and find that the river most suitable for the Slovaks to have ascended is either the Prut or the Sereth. I read in the typescript that in my trance I heard cows low and water swirling level with my ears and the creaking of wood. The Count and his box then was on the river in an open boat, propelled probably either by oars or poles, for the banks are near and it is working against the stream. There would be no such sound of floating downstream. Of course it may not be either the Sereth or the Prut, but we may possibly investigate further. Now of those two, the Prut is the more easily navigated, but the Sereth is at Fundu, joined by the Bistritza, which runs up around the Borgo Pass. The loop it makes is manifestly as close to Dracula's castle as can be got by water. It's been a while, my voice is really struggling, but I will get through this chapter. Mina Harker's journal continued. When I had done reading, Jonathan took me in his arms and kissed me. The others kept shaking me by both hands, and Dr. Van Helsing said, "Our dear Madam Mina is once more our teacher. Her eyes have been where we were blinded. Now we are on the track once again, and this time we may succeed. Our enemy is at its most helpless, and if we can come on him by day on the water, our task will be over. He has a start, but he is powerless to hasten, as he may not leave his box, lest those who carry him may suspect. For them to suspect would be to prompt them to throw him in the stream where he perish. This he knows and will not. Now, men, to our council of war, for here and now we must plan what each and all shall do. I shall get a steam launch and follow him, said Lord Godalming. And I horses to follow on the bank. And I horses to follow on the bank, lest by chance you land, said Mr. Morris. Good, said the professor, both good. But neither must go alone. There must be force to overcome force if need be. The Slovak is strong and rough, and he carries rude arms. All the men smiled, for amongst them they carried a small arsenal. Said Mr. Morris, I have brought some Winchesters. They're pretty handy in a crowd, and there may be wolves. The Count, if you remember, took some other precautions. He made some requisitions on others that Mrs. Harker could not quite hear or understand. We must be ready at all points. Dr. Seward said, I think I had better go with Quincy. We have been accustomed to hunt together, and we two, well armed, will be a match for whatever may come along. You must not be alone, Art. It may be necessary to fight the Slovaks, and a chance thrust, for I don't suppose these fellows carry guns, would undo all our plans. There must be no chances this time. We shall not rest until the Count's head and body have been separated, and we are sure that he cannot reincarnate. He looked at Jonathan as he spoke, and Jonathan looked at me. I could see that the poor dear was torn about it in his mind. Of course he wanted to be with me, but then the boat service would most likely be the one which would destroy the vampire. Why did I hesitate to write the word? He was silent a while, and during his silence Dr. Van Helsing spoke. Friend Jonathan, this is to you for twice reasons. First, because you are young and brave and can fight, and all energies may be needed at the last, and again that it is your right to destroy him, that which has wrought such woe to you and yours. Be not afraid for Madam Mina, she will be my care, if I may. I am old. My legs are not so quick to run as once, and I am not used to ride so long, or to pursue as need be, or to fight with lethal weapons. But I can be of other service. I can fight in other way, and I can die if need be, as John and Quincy guard the bank where, perchance, he might be landed. I will take Madam Mina right into the heart of the enemy's country, whilst the old fox is tied in his box, floating on the running stream, whence he cannot escape to land, where he dares not raise the lid of his coffin box, lest his Slovak carrier should in fear leave him to perish. We shall go in the track where Jonathan went, from Bistritz over to Borgo, and find our way to the castle of Dracula. Here Madam Mina's hypnotic power will surely help, and we shall find our way, all dark and unknown otherwise, after the first sunrise, when we are near that fateful place. There is much to be done, and other places to be made sanctified, so that the nest of vipers be obliterated. Here, Jonathan interrupted him hotly. Do you mean to say, Professor Van Helsing, that you would bring Mina, in her sad case and tainted as she is with that devil's illness, right into the jaws of his death trap? Not for the world, not for heaven or hell. He became almost speechless for a minute, and then went on. Do you know what the place is? Have you seen that awful den of hellish infantry? With the very moonlight alive with grisly shapes, and every speck of dust that whirls in the wind a devouring monster in embryo? Have you felt the vampire's lips upon your throat? Here he turned to me, and as his eyes lit on my forehead, he threw up his arms with a cry. Oh, my God, what have we done to have this terror upon us? Then he sank down on the sofa in a collapse of misery. The professor's voice, as he spoke in clear, sweet tones which seemed to vibrate in the air, calmed us all. Oh, my friend, it is because I would save Madam Mina from that awful place that I would go. God forbid that I should take her into that place. There is work, wild work to be done there, that her eyes may not yet see. We men here, all save Jonathan, have seen with our own eyes what is to be done before that place can be purified. Remember that we are in terrible straits. If the Count escape us this time, and he is strong and subtle and cunning, he may choose to sleep him for a century, and then in time our dear one, he took my hand, would come to him to keep him company, and would be as those others that you, Jonathan, saw. You have told us of their gloating lips, you heard their ribald laugh as they clutched the moving bag that the Count threw to them. You shudder, and well may it be. Forgive me that I make you so much pain, but it is necessary. My friend is in not a dire need for the which I am giving possibly my life. If it were that any one went into that place to stay, it is I who would have to go to keep them company. Do as you will, said Jonathan with a sob that shook him all over. We are in the hands of God. I'm just going to check. Okay. Later. Oh, it did me good to see the way that these brave men worked. How can women help loving men when they are so earnest and so true and so brave? And, too, it made me think of the wonderful power of money. What can it not do when it is properly applied, and what might it do when basely used? I felt so thankful that Lord Godalming is rich, and that both he and Mr. Morris, who also has plenty of money, are willing to spend it so freely. For if they did not, our little expedition could not start, either so promptly or so well equipped as it will within another hour. It is not 3 hours since it was arranged what part each of us wants to do, and now Lord Godalming and Jonathan have a lovely steam launch, with steam up ready to start at a moment's notice. Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris have half a dozen good horses, well appointed. We have all the maps and appliances of various kinds that can be had. Professor Van Helsing and I are to leave by the house 7:40 train tonight for Foresti, where we are to get a carriage to drive to the Borgo Pass. We are bringing a good deal of ready money, as we are to buy a carriage and horses. We shall drive ourselves. We have no one whom we can trust in the matter. The professor knows something of a great many languages, so we shall get on all right. We have all got arms, even for me a large-bore revolver. Jonathan would not be happy unless I was armed like the rest. Alas, I cannot carry one arm that the rest do. The scar on my forehead forbids that. Dear Dr. Van Helsing comforts me by telling me that I am fully armed as there may be wolves. The weather is getting colder every hour, and there are snow flurries which come and go as warnings. Later. It took all my courage to say goodbye to my darling. We may never meet again. Courage, Mina. The professor is looking at you keenly. His look is a warning. There must be no tears now, unless it may be that God will let them fall in gladness. Jonathan Harker's Journal, October 30th, night. I am writing this in the light from the furnace door of the steam launch. Lord Godalming is firing up. He is an experienced hand at the work, as he has had for years a launch of his own on the Thames and another on the Norfolk roads. Regarding our plans, we finally decided that Mina's guess was correct, and that if any waterway was chosen for the Count's escape back to his castle, the Sereth and then the Bistritza at its junction would be the one. We took it that somewhere about the 47th degree north latitude would be the place chosen for the crossing of the country between the river and the Carpathians. We have no fear in running at good speed up the river at night. There is plenty of water, and the banks are wide enough to apart to make steaming, even in the dark, easy enough. Lord Godalming tells me to sleep for a while, as it is enough for the present for one to be on watch. But I cannot sleep. How can I, with the terrible danger hanging over my darling and her going out into that awful place? My only comfort is that we are in the hands of God. Only for that faith it would be easier to die than to live, and so be quiet of all the trouble, Mr. Morris and Dr. Seward were off on their own long ride before we started. They are to keep up the right bank, far enough off to get on higher lands where they can see a good stretch of river and avoid the following of its curves. They have, for the first 2 stages, 2 men to ride and lead their spare horses, 4 in all, so as not to excite curiosity. When they dismiss the men, which shall be shortly, they shall themselves look after the horses. It may be necessary for us to join forces. If so, they can mount our whole party. One of the saddles has a movable horn and can be easily adapted from Mina, if required. It is a wild adventure we are on. Here, as we are rushing along through the darkness, with the cold from the river seeming to rise up and strike us, with all the mysterious voices of the night around us, it all comes home. We seem to be drifting into unknown places and unknown ways, into a whole world of dark and dreadful things. Godalming is shutting the furnace door. 31st of October. Still hurrying along. The day has come, and Godalming is sleeping. I am on watch. The morning is bitterly cold. The furnace heat is grateful, though we have heavy fur coats. As yet we have passed only a few open boats, but none of them had on board any box or package of anything like the size of the one we seek. The men were scared every time we turned our electric lamp on them, and fell on their knees and prayed. 1st November, evening. No news all day. We found nothing of the kind we seek. We have now passed into the Bistrica, and if we are wrong in our surmise, our chance is gone. We have overhauled every boat, big and little. Early this morning, one crew took us for a government boat and treated us accordingly. We saw in this a way of smoothing matters, so at Fundu, where the Bistrica runs into the Serif, we got a Romanian flag, which we now fly conspicuously. With every boat which we have overhauled since then, this trick has succeeded. We have had every deference shown to us, and not once any objection to whatever we chose to ask or do. Some of the Slovaks tell us that a big boat passed them, going at more than usual speed, as she had double crew on board. This was before they came to Fundu, so they could not tell us whether the boat turned into the Bistrica or continued down up the Sereth. At Fundu we could not hear of any such boat, so she must have passed there in the night. I am feeling very sleepy. The cold is perhaps beginning to tell upon me, and nature must have rest some time. Godalming insists that he shall keep the first watch. God bless him for all his goodness to poor dear Mina and me. 2nd November, morning. It is broad daylight. That good fellow would not wake me. He says it would have been a sin too, for I slept peacefully and was forgetting my trouble. It seems brutally selfish to me to have slept so long and let him watch all night, but he was quite right. I am a new man this morning, and as I sit here and watch him sleeping, I can do all that is necessary, both as to minding the engine, steering, and keeping watch. I can feel that my strength and energy are coming back to me. I wonder where Mina is now and Van Helsing. They should have got to Foresti about noon on Wednesday. I would take them some time to get the carriage and the horses, so if they had started and travelled hard, they would be about now at the Borgo Pass. God guide and help them. I am afraid to think what may happen. If we could only go faster, but we cannot. The engines are throbbing and doing their utmost. I wonder how Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris are getting on. There seem to be endless streams running down the mountains into this river, but as none of them are very large, at present at all events, though they are terrible doubtless in winter and when the snow melts, the horsemen may not have met such obstruction. The horsemen may not have met much obstruction. I hope that before we get to Strasbourg we may see them, for if by that time we have not overtaken the Count, it may be necessary to take counsel together what to do next. Dr. Seward's Diary, 2nd November. Three days on the road. No news and no time to write. If there had been, for every moment is precious. We have had only the rest needful for the horses, but we are both bearing it wonderfully. Those adventurous days of ours are turning up useful. We must push on. We shall never feel happy till we get the launch in sight again. 3rd of November. 3rd of November. We heard at Fundu that the launch had gone up the Bistrica. I wish it wasn't so cold. There are signs of snow coming, and if it falls heavy, it will stop us. In such case, we must get a sledge and go on, Russian fashion. 4th November. Today we have heard of the launch having been detained by an accident when trying to force a way up the rapids. The Slovak boats get up all right by aid of a rope and steering with knowledge. Some went up only a few hours before. Godalming is an amateur fitter himself, and evidently it was he who put the launch in trim again. Finally, they got off the rapids all right, with local help, and are off on the chase of Thrush. I fear that the boat is not any better for the accident. The peasantry tell us that after she got upon smooth water again, she kept stopping every now and again, so long as she was in sight. We must push on harder than ever. Our help really wanted soon. Mina Harker's Journal, 31st of October. Arrived at Foresti at noon. The professor tells me that this morning at dawn he could hardly hypnotize me at all, and that all I could say was dark and quiet. He is off now buying a carriage and horses. He says that he will later on try to buy additional horses so that we may be able to change them on the way. We have something more than 70 miles before us. The country is lovely and most interesting, if only we were under different conditions. How delightful it would be to see it all. If Jonathan and I were driving through it alone, what a pleasure it would be to stop and see people and learn something of their life, and to fill our minds and memories with all the colour and picturesqueness of the whole wild, beautiful country and the quaint people. But alas. Later. Dr. Van Helsing has returned. He has got the carriage and horses. We are to have some dinner and to start in an hour. The landlady is putting us up a huge basket of provisions. It seems enough for a company of soldiers. The professor encourages her and whispers to me that it may be a week before we can get any good food again. He has been shopping too, and has sent home such a wonderful lot of fur coats and wraps and all sorts of warm things. There will not be any chance of our being cold. We shall soon be off. I am afraid to think what may happen to us. We are truly in the hands of God. He alone knows what may be, and I pray him with all the strength of my sad and humble soul that he will watch over my beloved husband, that whatever may happen, Jonathan may know that I loved him and honoured him more than I can say, and that my latest and truest thought will always be for him. And that is where we end today on what is, I feel like every second chapter towards the end now is ended on a cliffhanger of like, oh, they're gonna have a confrontation with Dracula. It's about to go out, down. This might actually be the one. This might actually be the one. Okay, but that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and more Dracula, maybe the end of Dracula next week.